Most humans enjoy a good ghost story. It's something that has both terrified and fascinated people for centuries. In fact, it's something that humans may have had an interest in for more than 3,000 years, with a tablet made in ancient Babylon around 1500 BCE possibly being the earliest known depiction of a ghost. The type of ghost we're dealing with depends on the story being told. Different stories tells of a different type of ghost. One of the more famous examples are the spirits known as the White Lady. Spirits often seen dressed in white that has tragic backstories. However, there are other spirits that may not be as well known as the White Lady. One of those is a counterpart to the White Lady, a spirit that is known as the Grey Lady. If there's one place where you might find a Grey Lady, it's at a hospital. And what better place to start this video than with the arguably most famous Grey Lady ghost story. Opened on the 18th of July, 1879, the now abandoned Cambridge Military Hospital in Aldershot has quite the history. This hospital was the first base hospital to receive casualties directly from the Western Front during the First World War. It's also reported to have pioneered the supply of portable operating theaters and supplies for frontline duties. It is also known as the birthplace of plastic surgery in the British Empire, as it was at the Cambridge Hospital where such surgery was performed for the very first time. The end of the Second World War would see a decline in Britain's military commitments, which led to civilians being admitted to the hospital. The hospital was closed in February 1996 due to the discovery of asbestos in the walls, as well as the high cost of running such an old building. Aside from this rich history that exists within the hospital, it is also said to be the home of a Grey Lady. Haunting the upper floor between wards 10 and 14, the lady is believed to be a nursing sister of the Queen Alexandra's Imperial Military Nursing Service from World War I. It is said that she accidentally gave a soldier a fatal drug overdose and became so racked with guilt that she ended her life by throwing herself off the upper floor walkway. When the hospital was still operational, many ill or dying patients would describe seeing the ghost of a nurse tending to them, which has led to the belief that the lady is still performing her nursing duties even in death. A patient that asked for a jug of water, and the nurse tending to him gently told him that she would get him one shortly, as she was still busy with another patient that was terminally ill. The nurse would return sometime later with a jug, only to find that he already had one next to him. When asked, he told her that the other sister had gotten it for him. This would confuse the nurse, as she was the only one working the ward that night. When asked what this other nurse looked like, thinking that it might be a nurse who came up from one of the other wards, she asked the patient, what did this other nurse look like? The patient would then describe a woman wearing a much older uniform than the one that the sister working the ward was wearing that night. As for the terminally ill patient, they would pass away later that very night. Another sighting of the Grey Lady happened in 1986 when a patient was recovering from having had a hiatus hernia operation. They were now recovering in one of the wards on the top floor that was overlooking the back of the hospital, lying in the first bed right next to the nurse's station. Due to the operation, they had been propped up with several pillows. which made sleeping very difficult as they had to sleep sitting up. One night at around 2 a.m., they noticed a woman in uniform standing by a bed around 3 down from the patient. Thinking that she was the main nurse doing her rounds, the patient didn't really think much of it beyond noting that her uniform looked a bit off, much older than the ones that he had seen the other nurses wearing. But the strangest thing about this nurse was that she didn't seem to have a face. Only an oval shape, but no facial features whatsoever. Due to the lack of sleep, the patient was very tired, so the patient figured that his tired mind was playing tricks on him. That is until the next morning. The patient would ask the morning nurse who the nurse from last night had been. The morning nurse replied that no one had visited the ward that night. When asked why the patient wanted to know, he told her about the nurse in the old-fashioned uniform that he had seen the night before. The morning nurse would then turn white with her eyes wide open, and she exclaimed that he had seen the Grey Lady. To make matters worse, the patient that the late-night nurse had been visiting was found deceased when the morning nurses brought breakfast, only a few minutes later. Since the closing of the hospital, it has been converted into 140 private sale houses and apartments. But that does not mean that the sightings of the Grey Lady have stopped. Sightings of her also include the corridors being freezing cold with a faint scent of lavender lingering. When the hospital was being converted into houses and apartments, there were many workers around in the building. One of those workers said that one evening he suddenly felt ice cold. Looking down the old ward on the top floor, he noticed a nurse standing there, bending over as if she was tending to a patient lying in bed. This sighting was enough to make him refuse to go back to that part of the hospital. Another hospital said to be the home of a Grey Lady is the Salisbury General Infirmary, opened in 1767. When it opened, it used existing buildings on the side of Fisherton Street. A new building would be constructed and opened in 1771, after which the existing houses were removed. After being in use for over 200 years, services at the hospital would eventually be transferred to the newly built Salisbury District Hospital in 1991, which in turn led to the closing of the infirmary in 1993. And, like with the Cambridge Military Hospital, the infirmary would be converted to residential use in 1997. But the infirmary still has one enduring legend, and that is the presence of a Grey Lady. Unlike the Grey Lady known to reside in the Cambridge Military Hospital, the Grey Lady of Salisbury General Infirmary is known to have a more gentle presence. She's often seen at night around the wards or backstairs in your peripheral vision. Whenever she was seen, a sense of peaceful calm would follow, with many then seeing a lady in a grey dress passing by them. Whether or not this lady was a nurse working at the hospital is unknown, but what is known is that the people who have claimed to have seen her have all felt a strange calm whenever they did. Grey ladies are most often found in old buildings or old locations, which means that hospitals are not the only place where they can be found. Another example is the Fort St Angelo, located in Malta. Originally built in the medieval period as a castle and rebuilt by the Order of St John as Fort St Angelo between the 1530s and the 1560s. The fort is located in Birgu, Malta, and is best known for its role as the Order's headquarters during the Great Siege of Malta in 1565. But before the Order had the castle rebuilt as a fort, the Spanish crown of Aragon ruled over Malta. The fort, which was then known as the Castle by the Sea, was mainly used by Castellani, whose job it was to safeguard the interests of the Aragonese crown. This would include the de Nava family. According to legend, in 1469, the lord of Fort St Angelo was Giovanni de Nava. He was married to one of the noble ladies of Malta, but he also had a mistress. According to legend, this mystery woman was not satisfied with simply being a mistress. She wanted to have the same status as his wife and be treated as her equal. This would make de Nava worried that his wife would learn of his affair, as the affair becoming public would be very damaging to him in more than one way. So in order to not get caught, he ordered his guards to get rid of his mistress. The guards would then come to collect her, and as she protested, they took her away. They would then end her life and seal her body in a cell in the fort's dungeon. This would enrage de Nava, as he didn't intend for her to die. He simply wanted her sent away. So as punishment, the guards would have their lives ended as well. There are some claims that 3 bodies had been found when the authorities had made renovations to the fort. 1 woman and 2 men. However, there are no actual records of this, so it may be an embellishment of the legend. Still, from that point on, a ghost would be seen roaming the halls of the fort. Adults who encountered her described her as aggressive and vulgar, throwing around furniture and banging on the walls. But any child who saw her described her as the nice lady, a very pretty lady who was very kind to them but seemed very sad. The lady would roam the halls of the fort for centuries. Then World War II broke out and Fort St Angelo was being used by the British military. Injured or sick soldiers would be kept in the tunnels inside the fort. The severely injured were kept at a nearby naval hospital. According to a report made by a group of soldiers who were recovering in this makeshift hospital at Fort St Angelo, they had a very strange experience. One day, they felt the room that they were in grow very, very cold before they saw a lady entering the room. She moved in a way that almost made it look like she was floating. She didn't say anything, but she gestured at the men, indicating that she wanted them to follow her. Thinking that this woman was a nurse, the men, who all had minor injuries and could walk, got up and followed her out of the room. As they were making their way down one of the tunnels, they heard an explosion behind them. They would later learn that a bomb had hit the very room that they had been in. The mysterious nurse that they had followed out of the room was now gone, and the soldiers would go on to tell the story of how a ghost had saved their lives from certain death. The Grey Lady of Fort St Angelo has not been seen since the war, with some sources saying that a Maltese lady decided to help the ghost and get her to cross over, and that she is now at peace. Grey Lady spirits may not be as well known as their counterparts, the White Lady, or even the ghost known as the Lady in Black, but all 3 of them are very, very interesting. The White Lady is often seen in rural areas, often associated with local legends of tragedy. She often comes with a feeling of dread and sadness. The Lady in Black seems to be more of an avenging spirit, most often appearing to men who have misbehaved, let's say, in some ways, even physically attacking them in some cases. The Grey Lady, befitting her name, is somewhere in the middle. Depending on what happened to her, she either has similar sorrow as the White Lady or the same anger as the Lady in Black. But she's also willing to step in and help when necessary, either to bring comfort to someone in the last moment or even preventing someone from having their last moment.